At the end of October 2024, a 28-year-old woman disappeared without a trace in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean while on a boat trip with her husband and his friends. The search was unsuccessful. The body was never found. On October 21st, a private plane landed at Miami International Airport around 1:30 p.m. On board were John Mitchell, a 42-year-old owner of the largest chain of warehouses and logistics centers on the East Coast, and his young wife, Kiana. They had been married for only 2 weeks. Their honeymoon was supposed to be a time they would remember forever. John Mitchell built his empire over 15 years. Starting with 2 rented warehouse spaces in Georgia, he turned a modest business into a corporation with tens of millions of dollars in annual revenue. He was a man who was used to getting his way. In business negotiations, he did not know the meaning of the word impossible. His partners respected him for his toughness and ability to think several steps ahead. Mitchell's personal life was different. His first marriage had ended 7 years ago, and he had no children. Work consumed all his time and energy. He met Kiana by chance 9 months ago when he walked into a beauty salon near his office in Atlanta. She worked there as a manager. Her smile, her manners, her ability to hold a conversation, all of this caught his attention. She was completely different, unlike the women in his circle. Simpler, more natural, with a lively sparkle in her eyes. Kiana Reeves grew up in a poor family. Her mother, Barbara, worked as a nurse in one of Atlanta's hospitals, and she never knew her father. A beautiful life, expensive cars, restaurants, travel. Kiana had dreamed of all this since childhood, leafing through glossy magazines and observing the lives of the salon's wealthy clients. When John Mitchell began to show her attention, she couldn't believe her luck. He was successful, confident, generous. 3 months later, he proposed to her. The wedding was modest, at John's request, as he did not like unnecessary attention. Now they were flying to Miami, where the mansion of John's friends, Nicola and Giselle Flores, awaited them. A black SUV with tinted windows picked them up right at the plane's steps. Kiana looked out the window at the palm trees, wide avenues, and bright sun flooding the city with light, and couldn't help but smile. She squeezed John's hand as he looked at his phone, reviewing business correspondence. The drive to the mansion took about 40 minutes. The car turned off the busy street, drove through a closed gate, and stopped in front of a massive, modern-style building. White walls, huge panoramic windows, well-kept grounds with a pool and ocean views. Kiana got out of the car and froze. She had never seen anything like it. "Does all this belong to your friends?" she asked quietly. "One of their houses," John replied, taking her by the hand. "Nick owns real estate all over Florida. They come here several times a year." The front door was opened by a man in a dark shirt and trousers, a security guard, Kiana realized. Inside the mansion, it was cool. Marble floors, high ceilings, minimalist furniture, abstract paintings on the walls. Kiana walked slowly behind John, examining every detail. In the living room, they were greeted by the owners. Nicholas Flores was slightly younger than John, but looked older. He had short-cropped graying hair, an athletic build, and sharp, dark eyes. He ran a commercial real estate company, and his portfolio included shopping centers, office buildings, and residential complexes. He and John had attended the same university, although in different departments. Their friendship had lasted 20 years. Giselle, his wife, was a tall, elegant woman with flawless skin and a cool but friendly expression. She had left her career as a financial advisor several years ago and was now involved in charitable projects. "John, it's good to see you." Nick hugged his friend, then turned to Kiana. "And this must be your beautiful wife. Welcome, Kiana." "Thank you for agreeing to host us," Kiana replied, feeling her shoulders tense under Giselle's intense gaze. "You're welcome." Giselle stepped forward and gave Kiana a light hug. "We're so glad you're here. John is an old friend of ours, and it's a great joy to see him happy. Come, I'll show you around the house while the men discuss their business." John and Nick remained in the living room while Giselle led Keanu through the corridors of the mansion. She showed him room after room, bedrooms with ocean views, a study, a home theater, a gym, a wine cellar. Kiana tried to remain calm, but inside she was boiling with excitement. She had never imagined that it was possible to live in such a place. "You and John will be in the East Wing," said Giselle, opening the door to a spacious bedroom. "It's quiet here, and there's a separate exit to the pool. I hope you'll be comfortable." "This is incredible," Kiana breathed, approaching the window. Beyond the glass stretched the turquoise expanse of the pool, and beyond that, the horizon where the sky merged with the ocean. "You'll get used to it quickly," Giselle smiled. "John has a lot to offer you. He's one of those people who knows how to earn and how to spend. I think you made the right choice." Kiana turned to her, not knowing what to say. Giselle stood at the door, studying her with mild curiosity. "I love him," Kiana said. "He's a good man." "Of course," Giselle nodded. "John has always been decent. Get some rest and we'll have dinner together tonight. Nick has reserved a table at a restaurant. You'll like it." That evening, they drove to downtown Miami. The restaurant was located on the top floor of a high-rise building with a panoramic view of the city. The interior was decorated in dark colors, the tables were spaced far apart, and the waiters moved silently. Kiana felt out of place but tried not to show it. She wore a black dress that John had bought her before the wedding and high-heeled shoes. Giselle looked impeccable in a beige suit and a pearl necklace around her neck. During dinner, the men talked about business, discussing the real estate market and logistics. Kiana listened half-heartedly, occasionally glancing at Giselle, who was drinking wine and occasionally interjecting comments. The food was exquisite, but Kiana barely touched her meal. She was too excited about everything that was happening. "How do you like Miami?" Giselle asked when the men were momentarily distracted by phone calls. "It's amazing," Kiana replied. "I've never been to places like this. It all seems unreal." "You'll get used to it, trust me. The main thing is not to lose your head. Money comes and goes, but the ability to stay afloat is a skill that needs to be developed." Kiana nodded, not quite understanding what Giselle was getting at, but sensing that there was some experience behind those words. The next day, Giselle suggested that Kiana go shopping. John and Nick went to look at some real estate, and the women were left alone. They drove around the boutiques on the luxurious shopping streets, where Kiana was even afraid to touch anything when she saw the price tags. Giselle was confident as she picked out dresses, shoes, and accessories, insisting that Kiana try on everything she liked. "John won't mind if you spend money," Giselle said when Kiana hesitated, looking at an expensive bag. "Men love it when their women look good. It raises their status. Don't deny yourself." They sat in a cafe after several hours of shopping, and Giselle ordered them a glass of champagne. Kiana felt unusually light and free. "Can I ask you something?" Kiana began, and Giselle nodded. "What do you think you need to do to keep a rich man?" "I'm afraid of disappointing John. I'm not from his world, and sometimes I feel like he'll regret his choice." Giselle looked at her for a long time, then took a sip from her glass. "The main thing is to never be a burden or cause problems. Men of this caliber value peace and predictability in their personal lives. They have enough stress at work. At home, they want to see a beautiful, well-groomed woman who will support them and not ask unnecessary questions. Be grateful for what he gives you and don't try to meddle in his affairs. And one more thing, never lie. They don't forgive lies. If you hide something, sooner or later it will come out, and then it will all be over. They are too used to being in control to put up with deception." Kiana listened, nodded, and memorized every word. Giselle spoke calmly, without pressure, but her voice conveyed the confidence of someone who knows exactly how the world works. In the evening, when they returned to the mansion, Kiana called her mother. Barbara answered after the third ring, her voice sounding tired. "Hi, Mom, it's me." "Kiana, how are you, dear? How's the honeymoon?" "Everything is just incredible. We're staying in a huge house belonging to John's friends, with a view of the ocean. Yesterday we went to a restaurant where one dish costs as much as your weekly salary. Today we went shopping, and I bought so many things, I can't believe it. Mom, it's like I'm in a fairy tale. I'm happy for you, sweetie, Barbara said, a slight sadness in her voice. Just don't forget where you came from, and take care of yourself. I will, Mom. I promise. I just wanted you to know that I'm doing well, better than ever. After the conversation, Kiana stood on her bedroom balcony, looking out at the dark sea. A light breeze ruffled her hair. Down below by the pool, lights were on and muffled laughter could be heard. John was talking to Nick about something, their voices calm and measured. Kiana closed her eyes and smiled. She felt that her life had changed forever, and it was exactly what she had always dreamed of. The first week in Miami passed in a haze of happiness and carefree bliss. John and Kiana spent their days on the beach, dined at restaurants that Nick recommended as the best in town, and rowed a boat along the coast. Kiana absorbed every second of this new life. She got used to luxury faster than she expected. The Flores mansion became her temporary home, where every morning began with breakfast by the pool, and evenings ended with a glass of wine on the terrace overlooking the ocean. John was attentive and generous. He gave her jewelry, took her to galleries, and showed her the city. Kiana felt like her dream had come true. Giselle spent a lot of time with her. They went to yoga together, had lunch at a cafe on the waterfront, and discussed plans for the future. Kiana talked about how she wanted to do charity work and help children from poor families, and Giselle nodded approvingly, sharing her own experiences. A strange closeness developed between them, which surprised Kiana herself. Giselle seemed cold and unapproachable, but at the same time she was ready to give advice and support. Kiana trusted her. Nick and John often left on business, leaving the women alone. They looked at real estate, met with partners, and discussed possible deals. In the evenings, when everyone got together, the men talked about work, and the women listened, occasionally adding comments. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. On October 28th, the evening was particularly quiet. Kiana was tired after a long walk around town and went to bed early. John stayed downstairs in the living room, where Nick opened a bottle of whiskey and suggested they talk. It was around 11 p.m. when Giselle came downstairs and joined them. Her face was serious, almost gloomy. She looked at Nick, then at John, and something in her gaze made both men tense up. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "In the study. It's important." John put his glass on the table and stood up. Nick silently followed his wife. They went into the study, located in the west wing of the mansion. It was a spacious room with dark furniture, bookshelves, and a large window overlooking the courtyard. Nick closed the door and turned on the desk lamp. John stood by the window, waiting for an explanation. Giselle sat down in an armchair, folding her hands in her lap. "John, I don't know how to tell you this," she began, her voice trembling. "I saw something by accident this afternoon. Kiana and I were at the pool, and she asked me to go up to your bedroom and get her sunscreen from her bag. I opened her makeup bag and saw a package of pills there. I wouldn't have paid any attention to it, but the name of the medication seemed familiar." John turned to her, frowning. "What pills? What are you talking about?" "It's antiretroviral therapy," Giselle said slowly, as if weighing each word. "Medication used to suppress the human immunodeficiency virus. My brother takes the same thing. He's been HIV positive for 8 years, and I know these packages very well. I couldn't be mistaken." There was a moment of silence. John stood motionless, staring at Giselle, as if he didn't understand what she was saying. Nick walked over to the table, poured himself a whiskey, and drank it in one gulp. "Are you sure?" John asked hoarsely. "Absolutely," Giselle replied. "I held that package in my hands. Her name was on the prescription. Kiana Mitchell. I didn't want to believe my eyes, but it's true." John slowly sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. His breathing became heavy and irregular. Nick approached his friend and put his hand on his shoulder. "This is some kind of mistake," John muttered. "It can't be true. She would have told me. We had medical exams before the wedding. Everything was fine." "Maybe she faked the results?" Nick suggested quietly. "Or she got tested somewhere else and showed you someone else's documents. It's possible if you try hard enough." "Why?" John raised his head, his eyes shining with rage and despair. "Why would she do that? Why didn't she tell me the truth?" "Because you wouldn't have married her," Giselle replied coldly. "She wanted this life. You said yourself that she grew up poor. For people like that, money is everything. She took a risk, but it paid off. Until we found out." John stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. He walked over to the window and punched the frame. The pain sobered him up, but not for long. "I can't believe it. I don't want to believe it." "Then check it out," Nick said. "We can't just make assumptions. We need to find out the truth, the whole truth. If Giselle is right, this is only the beginning. Who knows what else she's hiding?" John turned to his friend. "How? How can I check without asking her directly?" Nick thought for a moment, then took out his phone and dialed a number. "I have someone who can take care of it. He's been working for me for over 10 years, responsible for the security of all my properties, a former military intelligence officer. If anyone can dig deeper without making a fuss, it's him." Damon Quincy arrived 20 minutes later. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man of about 47, with short hair and a scar on his left cheek. He was dressed in a dark jacket and jeans. His movements were precise and confident, his gaze cold and appraising. Nick briefly filled him in on the situation. Damon listened silently, asking no questions, only nodding occasionally. "Do you want me to check on your wife?" he asked John when Nick had finished. "Yes," John replied. "I need to know the truth. Everything there is to know. Medical records, past history, any documents, but without her suspecting anything." Damon nodded. "It can be done. I have contacts in medical institutions, archives, and the police. I'll need 3 days, maybe 4. I'll dig up everything I can find. Are you sure you want to know? Sometimes the truth is worse than we think." "I'm sure," John said firmly. "Go ahead." Damon left without saying goodbye. John, Nick, and Giselle stayed in the office for a while longer. No one spoke. Each was lost in their own thoughts. Finally, John got up and headed for the door. "I'm going to bed. Thank you for telling me. I should have known." "We're always on your side," Nick replied. "No matter what happens." John went up to the bedroom. Kiana was asleep, curled up under the blanket. Her face, illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the window, looked calm and serene. John stood by the bed for a long time, looking at her. He tried to find traces of deception, lies, something foreign in her features. But he saw only the woman he had fallen in love with 9 months ago. He lay down next to her, fully clothed, and closed his eyes. Sleep did not come. The next 3 days were a test for John. He continued to behave as usual, smiling at Kiana, hugging her, kissing her, taking her around town. But inside, he was consumed by anxiety. Every gesture, every word now seemed suspicious to him. He caught himself studying her, trying to understand who she really was. Kiana didn't notice anything. She was happy, carefree, in love. Or she was playing her part to the end. Nick tried to distract his friend, suggesting trips and meetings with business partners, but John refused. He couldn't focus on anything but waiting. Giselle also kept her distance from Kiana, citing headaches and fatigue. Kiana asked if everything was okay, but Giselle reassured her, saying she was just a little tired of the hustle and bustle of the city. On the evening of October 31st, Damon returned. It was almost midnight. Kiana went to bed early again, complaining of fatigue. John went downstairs, where Nick and Giselle were already waiting for him. They were sitting in the living room, and the tension in the air was palpable. Damon entered through the back door, holding a folder of documents in his hands. He put it on the table and looked at John. I found everything you asked for, and even more. John sat down across from him, feeling his heart pound. Nick moved his chair closer. Giselle stood by the fireplace with her arms crossed over her chest. Speak, John ordered. Damon opened the folder and took out several sheets of paper. Kiana Mitchell, née Reeves, 28 years old, born in Atlanta. Mother, Barbara Reeves, nurse, no father. You know that. But what you don't know comes next. He paused, looking John in the eye. 28 years ago, a male child was registered at an Atlanta hospital. Name, Kian Reeves. At the age of 23, this person underwent gender reassignment surgery. All documents were legally processed through the courts. Name changed to Kiana. This is your wife. John felt the ground slip away beneath his feet. He couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Nick cursed under his breath. Giselle turned away, covering her mouth with her hand. That's not all, Damon continued. The medical records indicate that Kiana was treated at the Atlanta Infectious Disease Clinic. The diagnosis is HIV infection. It was made 4 years ago. She receives antiretroviral therapy regularly. The viral load is suppressed, but the diagnosis remains. Here is a copy of her medical records. He placed a few more sheets on the table. And here are the gender reassignment documents. Everything is certified, everything is legal. John grabbed the papers with trembling hands. He looked at the lines, the stamps, the signatures, but couldn't believe what was happening. This was his wife. The woman he had spent 9 months with. The woman for whom he had paid $50,000 for a ring. The woman he had brought here, to Miami, to spend the best days of his life with. And she had lied to him. About everything. How did she hide it? Nick asked, breaking the silence. You had medical exams before the wedding, right? She gave me documents from some private clinic, John replied hollowly. I didn't check. I trusted her. I thought I loved her. She deceived you, Damon said. On purpose. She knew you were rich, and she knew that if she told the truth, she would never have that life. John slowly raised his head. His face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes burned with rage. She used me. Yes, Nick confirmed. She used you. Now what? John stood up, crumpling the documents in his hands. He walked to the window and looked out into the darkness. The ocean roared somewhere in the distance, but the sound brought no comfort. I don't know, he whispered. I don't know what to do. Giselle approached him and placed her hand on his shoulder. You have to make a decision, John. Either you accept it or you do something about it. But leaving things as they are is not an option. She deceived you. She put you at risk. She lied about who she was. People paid dearly for less. John stood by the window for a few more minutes, staring into the darkness. No one dared break the silence. Damon gathered the documents back into the folder and placed it on the table. Giselle returned to the fireplace. Nick poured himself another whiskey. Finally, John turned around. His face was impassive, but his eyes burned with cold fury. I want to kill her, he said quietly but clearly. I want her to disappear, forever. Nick put his glass on the table and looked at his friend. He didn't seem surprised. Giselle was silent, studying John intently. Damon didn't move, as if he hadn't heard the words. Are you sure about what you're saying? Nick asked slowly. Absolutely, John replied. She deceived me. She jeopardized my health, my reputation, my life. She used me as a tool to achieve her goals. I can't live with that. I won't live with that. Nick stood up and walked over to his friend. He put his hand on his shoulder and looked him straight in the eye. If that's what you really want, I'll help you. She deserves it. She didn't just deceive you, she deceived us. We took her into our home, trusted her, and she lied to us the whole time. People shouldn't be able to get away with things like that. John nodded. A silent understanding passed between them. Giselle moved away from the fireplace and sat down in an armchair. How are you going to do it? she asked. You can't just go and kill someone without thinking about the consequences. You need a plan. We need to be sure that no one will find out. Nick thought about it, pacing around the room. Damon watched them without interfering. He was here as a witness, as a man who had done his job and was now waiting for further instructions. The yacht, Nick said finally. We'll take my yacht and head out to the open sea. Tomorrow morning. I'll say I want to take a trip, show you the coast from the water. Kiana won't suspect anything. We'll go far from the shore, where there are no witnesses, where the water is deep enough. And there we'll do what we have to do. John listened intently. Every word Nick said formed a clear picture in his mind. What if she starts to resist? Scream? John asked. There will be 3 of us, and she will be alone, Nick replied. We can handle it, and no one will hear her out on the open sea. The main thing is to act quickly and decisively, without hesitation. Giselle stood up and walked over to her husband. Do you understand what you're getting yourself into? Do we all understand? This isn't a game. If we do this, there's no turning back. I understand, Nick said, and I'm ready. John is my friend. More than a friend. We've been through a lot together. I won't let some lying woman ruin his life. She chose this path herself. Now she'll pay for her choice. John walked over to Nick and hugged him. It was a gesture of gratitude, despair, and determination all at once. Thank you, John whispered. I'll never forget this. Damon got up and headed for the door. If you need help, you know where to find me, he said. But the fewer people who know, the better. Nick nodded, and Damon left, closing the door behind him. The 3 remaining sat in the office for a while longer, discussing the details. Nick talked about how they would leave early in the morning. Giselle suggested bringing a bottle of champagne to make it look like a celebration. John was silent, only nodding occasionally. Inside, he was a storm of emotions, but on the outside, he remained calm. Around 2 in the morning, they parted ways. John went up to the bedroom and lay down next to Kiana. She was sleeping, snoring quietly. He lay there for a long time, with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she would be gone. Tomorrow, he would become a murderer. The thought did not frighten him. It brought a strange sense of relief. On the morning of November 1st, Kiana woke up in a good mood. The sun flooded the bedroom with light, and palm trees rustled outside the window. She stretched and turned to John, who was already awake. He was looking at her, and there was something strange in his gaze, but Kiana didn't pay any attention to it. Good morning, she chirped, kissing him on the cheek. How did you sleep? Fine, John replied briefly. Get dressed. Nick wants to take us on a yacht trip. He said he'll show us the coast from the water. Kiana's face lit up with a smile. Really? Oh, that's so cool. I've never been on a yacht. It'll be unforgettable. John nodded and got out of bed. He went to take a shower, leaving Kiana alone. She jumped for joy like a child who had been promised a trip to an amusement park. She quickly got dressed, choosing a white summer dress and sunglasses. She put on her makeup, grabbed her purse, and went downstairs. Nick, Giselle, and John were already waiting for her in the living room. Nick was wearing a light-colored shirt and shorts, and Giselle was wearing an elegant beach outfit. They looked relaxed and friendly. Kiana didn't notice the tension that hung in the air. Ready for an adventure? Nick asked with a big smile. Today is perfect weather for going out to sea. The wind is light. The waves are small. We'll have a great time. I'm so excited, Kiana replied. Thank you for inviting us. It's our pleasure, said Giselle, hugging Kiana's shoulders. You're like a sister to us. We want you to remember this day. They drove to the marina in Nick's car. The trip took about 20 minutes. The marina was located in a sheltered bay, where dozens of yachts of various sizes were moored. Nick's yacht was one of the largest, a snow-white vessel about 20 meters long, with 2 decks and a spacious stern. The name on the side read Fortuna. Nick helped everyone on board, started the engine, and the yacht slowly pulled away from the pier. Kiana stood at the bow, holding onto the railing and watching as the shore gradually receded. The wind ruffled her hair, the sun blinded her eyes. She felt free, happy, alive. John sat at the stern, looking out at the ocean. Nick steered the yacht, glancing at the GPS navigator from time to time. Giselle sat in the shade, sipping champagne from a glass. The yacht sailed further and further from the shore. An hour later, the coastline had become a thin line on the horizon. All around was water, the endless blue of the ocean, and the sky clear and cloudless. Nick turned off the engine, and the yacht stopped, rocking on the waves. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the sound of the water and the cries of seagulls in the distance. "This is a great spot," Nick said, coming out of the wheelhouse. "The depth is about 200 meters. It's the perfect place to enjoy the view." Kiana approached him, smiling. "It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. It's as if we're alone in the whole world." "Yes," Nick replied, a strange note in his voice. "We really are alone." John stood up and walked over to Kiana. He was holding a folder she hadn't noticed before. His face was serious, almost gloomy. Kiana frowned, sensing that something was wrong. "John, are you okay? You seem strange." John opened the folder and took out several sheets of paper. He handed them to Kiana. "Read this," he said coldly. Kiana took the sheets with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the lines and her face paled. They were medical records, documents about her gender reassignment, prescriptions for antiretroviral drugs, photographs of her old documents, which bore the name Kian. Her entire past, the whole truth that she had so carefully hidden, was here, on these sheets of paper. Where did you get these?" she whispered, dropping the papers on the deck. "It doesn't matter where," John replied. "What matters is that it's the truth. You lied to me, about everything, about who you are, about your health, about your past. You used me to get the life you dreamed of, and you thought I would never find out." Kiana staggered as if she had been struck. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She sank to her knees, covering her face with her hands. "I was afraid," she sobbed. "I was afraid to tell you the truth. I knew you wouldn't understand, that you would leave. I wanted this life so badly, John. You have no idea how much I wanted it. I grew up in poverty, working for pennies, watching other people live in luxury, dreaming of feeling like one of them just once. When you came along, I thought it was fate, that I was being given a chance, and I couldn't let it slip away." "You put me at risk," John said, his voice trembling with rage. "You could have infected me. You tricked me into marrying you knowing you were a man. You're not human, Kiana. You're a monster." "No!" Kiana cried, raising her head. "I love you. I really do. My viral load is undetectable. The risk of infection is minimal. I take my medication every day. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted to be with you." "Shut up," Nick ordered, moving closer. "Your words mean nothing. You lied, and that says it all." Kiana looked at him, then at Giselle, who stood aside, cold and indifferent. Understanding slowly began to break through the panic. She realized that they all knew, that they hadn't brought her here for no reason. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. John and Nick exchanged glances. Then Nick stepped forward and grabbed Kiana's arms. She tried to break free, but he was stronger. John took a coil of rope out of his bag. Kiana screamed, but her cry was drowned out by the sound of the waves and the wind. They tied her hands behind her back, then her legs. She struggled, tried to resist, but it was useless. "Please," she sobbed. "Please don't do this. I'll fix everything. I'll leave. You'll never see me again. Just let me go." "It's too late," John said, looking at her without a trace of pity. "You chose this path yourself. Now you'll pay for your choice." Nick brought a heavy metal weight used for anchors from the lower deck. He tied it to Kiana's legs with a strong rope. Kiana continued to scream, begging for mercy, swearing her love, promising anything. But no one listened to her. John and Nick lifted her up and dragged her to the edge of the ship. Giselle stood at a distance, watching what was happening with an expression of detached interest on her face. "John, please!" Kiana screamed one last time, looking him in the eyes. "I love you!" John turned away. Nick nodded. They pushed her overboard. Kiana fell into the water with a dull splash. The weight pulled her down instantly. She tried to swim up, thrashing and writhing, but the ropes held tight. The water closed over her head. In a few seconds, the surface of the ocean was smooth, as if nothing had happened. Only a slight ripple from the waves reminded him that there had been life here, which was now gone. John stood at the rail, staring at the water. His face was impassive. Nick put his hand on his shoulder. "It's over," he said. "She got what she deserved." Giselle walked over to her husband and hugged him. No one spoke. The yacht rocked on the waves, and the silence was absolute. Nick returned to the wheelhouse and started the engine. The yacht turned around and slowly headed back to shore. They returned to the marina around 4 in the afternoon. They moored, went ashore, got in the car, and drove back to the mansion. No one spoke on the way. Everyone was lost in their own thoughts. John looked out the window, watching the streets of Miami, palm trees, houses, and people flash by. Life went on as if nothing had happened. At the mansion, Nick opened a bottle of whiskey, and the three of them sat in the living room, staring silently into space. John felt a strange emptiness inside. Not remorse, not pity, just emptiness. Kiana was gone. She was no longer there, and no one would ever know what had really happened. "What will we say if someone asks?" Giselle broke the silence. "We'll say she went for a walk on the beach in the morning and didn't come back," Nick replied. "We looked for her but couldn't find her. We'll file a missing person report. The police will look for her, find nothing, and close the case. People disappear every day." John nodded. It was a reasonable plan, simple and plausible. No one would dig deeper unless there was a reason to. "I'm flying back to Atlanta tomorrow," John said. "I need to get back to work, to my life." "Of course," Nick agreed. "Do what you have to do. We'll always be in touch. If you need anything, just let me know." John got up and headed for the stairs. He went up to the bedroom where Kiana had slept the night before. Her things were on the table, her perfume was on the nightstand. He gathered it all up and put it in a suitcase. Tomorrow he would take it away and get rid of it. No traces, no memories. John didn't sleep that night. He lay in the dark, listening to the sound of the ocean outside the window. Somewhere down there, at the bottom, lay Kiana. The woman he loved. The woman who had deceived him. The woman who was no longer there. On the morning of November 2nd, John left the mansion. Nick and Giselle walked him to his car. They hugged, said goodbye, and promised to stay in touch. John got in the car and drove away without looking back. He left behind a luxurious life in Miami, friendship, trust, and a corpse at the bottom of the ocean. A week later, the Miami police received a report that Kiana Mitchell was missing. The search went on for several days, but nothing was found. The case was suspended due to lack of evidence. Kiana was officially listed as missing. John Mitchell returned to his work. He continued to run his warehouse empire, closing deals and meeting with partners. Outwardly, nothing had changed, but inside, something had broken, something that would never be the same again. Kiana Mitchell disappeared in the waters of the Atlantic at the end of October 2024. Her body was never found. No one ever learned the truth about what happened on the yacht that day. 3 people kept the secret, and the ocean swallowed all the evidence. The story ended as quietly as it began, in luxury, deception, and the cold calculation of people for whom the truth was more valuable than human life.